Welcome to our podcast. I'm Alex Bryant.
And I'm Angela Bryant.
And this is
The Way We See It.
If you're watching this right here on Facebook, you're seeing that you're watching an episode of our podcast that you normally listen to. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, this is like a visual representation of the podcast.
And we have a special guest. Let's get right to it. It's my man, the Reverend Bishop Extraordinaire, Charlie Mitchell. What's up, brother?
Man, what's going on, guys? Man, it's so good to be with y'all this morning.
Man, it is awesome to have you with us, man. Charlie and us, we go way back. Charlie and I used to work together in ministry down in Fort Myers, Florida. And since then, he and his lovely wife, Erin, they have moved to Baltimore. Is that how you guys say it?
That's how you say it, Doc.
They moved to Baltimore and they planted a church there, Epiphany Church. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, Charlie, and give us a shout out. What's up?
Man, it's been a journey, Doc. I'm a Florida boy through and through, born in Key West and raised in Fort Myers, and so being this far away from the ocean is kind of weird. So I'm on the coast, but I ain't that close to the coast. So
how close to the water? Wait, how far?
Man, to the beach, to a real beach, not a lake, not a river, not a creek. Like to a real beach, it takes us about 3 hours.
What?
So yeah, so this is like being in no man's land for me. But you can't see the horizon. It's just weird. It's a real city. You know what I'm saying?
Man, you go from Key West to that. God must be mad at you, bro. What did you do?
No, man. I felt the calling. When I moved back to my mom's old crib in Fort Myers. After the economic downturn in 2008, I remember moving back out there just feeling the Lord put some pressure on me, like, Charlie, I really want you to be a missionary to your people. We had we were at a church that had a big missions emphasis, First Assembly. And I was kind of dreaming and thinking I would just go back overseas and kind of do that thing over there. And the Lord was like, nah, I need you to learn the language, learn the culture, and kind of and reach these folks. Yeah. And for me, that wasn't sexy because all of us our dream is to get out of the hood. You know what I mean? And so in a lot of regards, that it's changed and evolved over the years. But we literally moved to Baltimore to just be a part of the solution and be a part of seeing the gospel do what we believe the gospel can do, and that is transform lives. Yeah. And so you hear about it all the time and you hear about stuff overseas, but I was like, man, right here in our own backyard, we have a lot of needs and a lot of issues. And the Lord just, put it on our heart to kind of plant. I didn't know what church plant was. So when I was at First Assembly, for me, that was the biggest thing in the world. Like, you know what I mean? We're traveling internationally. Yeah. We're doing youth ministry. We're doing college and young adult ministry. We're doing children's ministry. All of it was like these big things. And so I had never known that you could plant a church, like you could start a church, because most churches in our neighborhoods growing up were just churches that had been there.
Already existed. Yeah.
Right. And so this idea of you can make disciples in a particular community or neighborhood, and then those group of disciples come together to worship Jesus. And it was like a light bulb went off. I was like, oh, that's what a church is. Disciples that get together to worship Jesus. And like, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I just want to make disciples of dudes in the hood, and we going to worship, and they going to get married. We're going to have kids. And we got a church. And so that was literally like how it all came together in my mind and my heart. And then, this idea of somebody came along and was like, man, you need to start a church. I was like, what is that? And so I went to Camden, New Jersey to learn how to plant a church. And so I got to see it from its inception to its fulfillment, kind of a group of people that turned into like an organization. Yeah. And we started ministries and kind of did it from the ground up. So I got to be a part of that because it's rare to see. Church planting and evangelicalism is a popular kind of sexy, cool thing to do. Yeah. But it's typically in the suburbs or in growing communities. Very rare to see it in an inner city community from the ground up. Yeah. And so I got to do that in Camden, and at that time, one of the worst cities in America. And me and my wife, who's from Central Wisconsin, town of 5,000 people. We moved into a row home on the block in Camden. And then from there, we were just like, Lord, where would you have us to go? I wrote a list of all the worst cities in America, so you were already taking care of St. Louis. And we could knock that off the list.
Wait a second. I don't know about that, brother. Just for the record, you wasn't taking care of nothing. So there's a lot of
you know what I'm saying? Exactly. But literally, I put Detroit. I put, we were across the bridge from Philly. I wasn't interested in that. We were, Gary, Indiana. We looked at Milwaukee. I was like, maybe Milwaukee. Aaron's family from Wisconsin. She was like, no. Everything is too cold, too much snow, too dangerous.
And the too many Green Bay Packers there too. I wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, there you go. That ain't none of my business. So don't get me in nothing. And so from Jersey, it's an hour drive to Baltimore. And so we took a day trip down here with the kids, and we got to see you pull into the city, and you see the what is it? The Chamber of Commerce, the Visitor Center, the Baltimore City Visitor Center. That's kind of in a nice part of town or whatever. It's got the little touristy things that you can check out. Every city's got it. And so we went there, and they had a theater in the actual visitor center, and it showed the history of the city. And we needed someplace for the kids just to kind of run around. At this point, they're 5, 2, and 1 or something like that, 5, 2, and a baby. And so it's like, we need someplace for them to kind of kill some energy before we get back on the road. And literally, Erin was like, she watched the 20-minute video, and she was like, this is us. Like, this is our story. Like, the racial tension, the history of international folks coming here in the past, this being an industrial city, but it also having this seafaring kind of economy and all that. My dad being a shrimper and a fisherman his whole life. So all of these things in the plantations in the southern kind of culture, but it's up north, all these things kind of, she was like, this is really kind of us and our story. Yeah. It just makes sense. And so that was, for me, when your wife gives you a green light like that, and she said no to everything else, I'm like, you know what, Holy Spirit, I'm going to just take it and run with it. And so we've been here for almost 4 years now. And we've got a church in the city. We planted it here. We didn't know anybody when we moved here. And we're probably about 100 folks or so. COVID changes everything, of course. But when we were meeting traditionally, we were at about 85, 90 folks weekly, predominantly African-American. I got my wife and one other family that's white in our church. In a 64, in a 64% African-American city. In the DMV, which is largely African-American, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area, and so it's a unique city. It's hard. It's row homes, it's bricks. It ain't palm trees and sunshine like I'm used to. But I believe this is fertile soil for the gospel to grow. Yeah. But at the same time, we got here soon after the Freddie Gray uprising, depending on who you ask in the city. So depending on who you ask, it's the uprising or the riots. Yeah, and that's how it is, isn't it? Right. And so so we got here after that, and so that tension has been a part of the fabric of how we've had to navigate the city and what we do. And so this conversation we're having is a relevant, appropriate, and one that we wrestle with all the time.
Yeah, man, Charlie, thanks for just even sharing that. And as you're reminiscing, or as you're sharing your story, I'm reminiscing about some of our moments of intersection, wanting to jump in and just kind of put on my stuff. But, you don't need me to say this, and, I'm the one, but I'm proud of you. I mean, I've been watching you on the journey, even from the time that you and Aaron, when you first got married and right after your mom died, you helped raise your siblings, because you guys were the only ones. And I think you were 22 years old, raising,
that's right.
2 teenage siblings. And just the journey you've been on with your faith, and to see you all doing what you're doing now, leaving everything, going up there to Baltimore to answer the Lord's calling. You don't need us to say it, but proud of you, man. And
man, thank you, Doc. Doc, listen, My pops died at 13 years old, and over the years, it's been men like you and families like y'all that have been those points along my journey. I was telling Aaron the other day, you know, I had a moment of self-realization the other couple weeks ago. Just like, man, it hasn't been like it could easily be like, man, this church or this ministry did this or that. But literally, it was men and women along the path that kind of, you know, that kind of help steer you along, give you a little bit of clarity, and you evolve and you go. Now, I done made a lot of bumps and dropped the ball in a lot of places, but I'm grateful for guys like you that invested, that cared, and that had those I see in you moments. Like, I see something in you, and so to hear you say that really means a lot, bro.
Man, it doesn't take a lot to see that. A lot of people have seen it in you and stuff, and so yeah, man. So
I want to talk about something that you mentioned. I loved how you said that as the missionary emphasis that we all love and had a part of at First Assembly. I've been saying that a lot, that like we don't see the fact that we need to learn about our different cultures here in the States. We have just this assumption that we're all the same. I already know, I understand. What do you have to tell me about? But I've said that like, you know, you have to have some humility. Like, just if you were going to go on a mission trip, you would look up some information about that culture before you went there and started interacting, if you were going on a mission trips overseas. And so I love that you brought that out, because yeah, it is a different culture, you know? And so you guys understanding that concept, we need to get that message out, that like we have to learn about each other.
Amen.
And accept the fact that even though we're all America, you know, we all live in America, it's not the same everywhere. And we need that.
And we say that about a lot of things. Like, you know, you guys were from the Midwest moving down to Florida. The differences in the food, in the way we talk, in the way we carry ourselves, you know, from the Midwest to the East Coast or the West Coast, you know, like we acknowledge those differences.
Yeah.
Down south, they called the people up north Yankees, all that kind of stuff. You know, and so there's differences, and so to not acknowledge that was, like you said, would be to flatten those peoples.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But this, I mean, the DMV, I've been here 3 years, and Baltimore is unique to Baltimore. Like, it ain't like, and y'all have had jokers that are from Baltimore. These are some hard-headed
I've been
jokers.
there. I've been
You
there.
know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So listen, so it's different from what I'm used to in Florida, where it's a lot more of a cross-cultural culture. This is like, oh man, like, and so yeah, so we got to do it in our own backyard. There's worlds of missionary opportunity that take time to learn and to get acclimated to.
Yes.
Well, we share this in our book, but when we first moved to Florida to do ministry, it revealed how ignorant I was racially. We've been around black or white, and you know, there's a lot of brown. And I remember one of the first times I share this in our book, I go on I was on a little outreach, or we went on a retreat with Pastor Leah in the youth ministry there, the Latino youth ministry. And after a few days, we're coming back, and we've had a great time. I've preached to these kids, I've built rapport with them, and we're in a McDonald's on our way back, and I asked the question, so are you guys all Mexican? Yeah.
Exactly.
Because all I knew was black, white, and Mexican. I was racially ignorant. Man, Charlie,
that's a cuss word.
It is. And their necks snapped at me. Kids are like 20 feet away from me ordering, and you think that I was talking directly in their ear. They snapped at me. No, I'm Guatemalan, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Honduran, I'm Bolivian. You know, I'm like, my bad, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it revealed my ignorance, because we had never been around Latino people like that.
Yeah, I grew up around Cubans in the Keys, Puerto Ricans in Fort Myers. You know what I mean? And everybody, like you said, everybody's distinct. Everybody's got their own. Like, we don't eat rice and beans like Mexicans. It's like, oh, my bad, man. Like, I didn't know, dog.
I didn't know, man.
You know what I mean? Y'all eat tacos? Oh, man. So it's like, oh, all right, let me, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I get you.
You know who was one of them? Our mutual friend. I ain't going to say his name, but I'll say his initials, AQ. And then he took us down to Puerto Rico and saw how beautiful it was. And so you see how people are proud of their heritage and their culture, and it is offensive. If you're, are you Mexican? No, I'm Puerto Rican.
Educate yourself.
Educate yourself. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I called my man Charlie this week, and I was like, Charlie, I need you to have a discussion with me. Can you please tell me which lives matter? And so, we're talking about the whole Black Lives Matter, the movement, and I get so many phone calls, texts, emails, messages from people. Like, we're getting 200-300 messages a day now, and just about questions, a lot of comments on it, pastors, lay people, whatever. And so, Black Lives Matter, Charlie. Well, I want to talk about that today. And what we're trying to do as well, just so you know, this is to our audience that might be listening on the podcast, we're going to start introducing a little segment, and we'll do this for a season here. Our little, The Way We See It, that's our podcast, The Way We See It, topic of the day. And so Angie and I are going to come on and just discuss a few of these little topics and little small vignettes, 5-10 minutes, I don't know.
We have lots of opinions, so they might go longer.
They might, and I am a brother, because brothers can go a little long. But I wanted to have a discussion with you, Charlie, about Black Lives Matter and the supporting it and all that stuff. So you grew up in Baltimore. I know there's a chapter there. What have you had any interaction with Black Lives Matter? What's the scene there in Baltimore?
Well, like I said, Black Lives Matter is, we haven't had direct interaction with them as an organization, but Baltimore itself is very politically engaged.
Freddie Gray.
At post Freddie Gray, there's been a heightened kind of engagement with all of those. So there's a million different organizations like that. That are the spectrum, whether they're from the Nation of Islam, Hebrew Israelites. So those are kind of the religious spaces. But then you've got Safe Streets, and you've got other organizations that are advocating for different things politically. You've got other organizations. You got strong Black churches that are politically engaged in advocacy and all that kind of stuff. So we've not had to directly engage with Black Lives Matter. But there's any number of organizations that are similar in scope and in engagement that are dealing with similar issues.
Yeah, and so I just want to kind of say as well, if you're watching our podcast on Facebook, you may not know this, but most people know with our podcast that we do on Tuesdays is that we look at things from the Christian perspective. We are Christian people. My wife and I are both Christian pastors. Charlie's a Christian pastor. I happen to be Black. Charlie happens to be Black. Angie happens to be white. We always say that race describes us, but it doesn't define us. We're Christian, pastors. And so because I'm Black, and I don't want to speak for you as well, Charlie, I'm very engaged in my Black community. I'm very pro-Black. I want to see the plight of our people improve. I want to see us as a people grow and increase. And I do think that there are factors in America that have hindered that. I'm not using it as an excuse, but it just is what it is. And so, so then when you look at like an organization like Black Lives Matter, I want to speak personally. When it first came on the scene that I was aware of, there was something inside of me that was always drawn to that, whether it was, the sentiment. I didn't know the movement at the time. Black Lives Matter, just to give you a little history, really started, and I think it was 2012, or maybe it was 2013 after the Trayvon Martin, deal there in Florida. And so it was a hashtag after Trayvon Martin was killed. And that hashtag went online, it just went all over. Black Lives Matter. It's like, hey, see us. Black Lives Matter was founded by three ladies. Patrice Kalours, she's from Los Angeles. I actually read her book, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit here in a minute. But also Alicia Garza, she's a woman from Oakland, and she says she is proud of, she's a proud queer woman from Oakland. And then Opal Tometi, she's from New York. She's a Nigerian American from New York. And so these ladies kind of came together. A lot of them were activists, and they wanted to just start putting this hashtag on, Black Lives Matter. And then I was kind of introduced, or came head on with Ange and myself in Ferguson. We were pastoring a church there right in the heart of Ferguson, literally 4.7 miles from where Mike Brown was killed. And that was in 2014. And man, we saw that movement gain steam and just grow. And the Black Lives Matter movement went wild, and it just went crazy. Wow. And again, I'm just going to say this as a Black person who I say this all the time, I have a predominantly positive view of race relations with white people. I'm married to a white woman. At that time, I'd been married to a white woman for probably 12, 14 years at that time. And, but yet still, I know you're doing the math right now in your head. She's going, because Angie's so precise. I can't say 12 to 14 years without her saying, no, actually it was 13 years, 4 days, 2 hours.
I didn't say anything.
I can tell by the looks. See, now the people are getting to see the looks that I get when we do our podcast. But so, you know, there's something inside of me that identified with that statement, that slogan, that movement. It was all one at that time. And so I like that. And then I saw my white brothers and sisters have a natural visceral reaction like, wait a minute. Don't all lives matter? And that was hard for me. I mean, can you speak to that, Charlie, a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, Black Lives Matter in its inception, you gave the history of that particular term. But for African Americans, we've had to use a litany of terms to express the same sentiment. So if you go back to the 60s with Dr. King, what did they have on the signs in Memphis? I am a man.
I'm a man.
Why? Because because Black people were treated as less than. They were called boy, you know? And so you had these grown men that were being called boy and treated as less than human. In the Constitution, we're considered 3/5 human. Yeah. So we've always had to justify our existence in America. And so, you know, so Black Lives Matter isn't like as new as the institution is currently, that the sentiment isn't new. And it is something that we've had to justify and argue for and protest for since the inception of us being here in the United States. So, you know, in that regard, this is a part of a long legacy of movements to justify Black human life.
Yeah.
And so
that's good.
So in that regard, yeah, that's it's a reality. This is something new because it's our contextualized thing. I was reading Dr. King, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos and Community, the book he wrote a year before he was assassinated. And he wrestles with Stokely Carmichael on Black Power.
Yeah. And
how that was one of those slogans that had caused division in the movement. Yeah. It was like, man, why, guys, Black Power, it just creates an image in white people's minds.
It's a visceral.
That we're trying to overthrow something, not gain equality. And which I think there's a nuance with Black Lives Matter. It's just saying that Black lives matter. Like we are significant enough to fight for and defend. And it's not power. It's not all of those things. Now the institution might be a little bit different because they've explained their nuance. Yeah. But I think we've got to wrestle with the words and the slogans that we have. But this isn't anything new. This is a part of the legacy.
Good point.
Yeah, Charlie, that's really good. Yeah. You know, and I was just thinking about that when you said that. You go back to the late '90s, the early 2000s with the wrestle of and going back from the I am a man to, hey, I see you. I see you. Do you see me? And there's white people that are watching this that you might have noticed that in the Black community, if I'm walking in the mall or whatever and I see another brother, I'm just going to give them, I see you. I see you. You see me.
The head nod. You get the head nod. It's called a nod, man. Yeah.
And then I can think about in, I don't know, the 2000s and that first decade or whatever with Oprah and her "I Speak Your Name." I think that was a Maya Angelou, poem. If I'm not wrong on that.
Wow.
But just like, hey, I speak your name. You matter enough for me to say your name, to speak your name, to acknowledge you. Yeah. And Charlie, I think that was so interesting how you you put those together. And I hope that people hear that and see that.
Yeah, and I mean that's been the issue. That's been the issue with our history of not having names that we were given from our ancestors, with our history of not having a sense of somebody. That's what Dr. King calls it, a sense of somebodyness. White people, they hear as a threat when we're saying we need ways in which we can dignify ourselves. So I know you're an early hip hop head, early rap. You know what I mean? You were in a different era than I am.
Why
And so
you gotta mess with my age, Charlie? Why you
know
gotta?
what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But
old.
you remember the 90s when we went through that the late 80s and early 90s when everybody went through the consciousness movement, where it was like Public Enemy and African medallions and all of those kinds of things. Why? To say, man, you guys, we have a heritage. Like, we have a history that doesn't start with slavery. Right. And then, you know, I got to tell you, growing up and you would hear Farrakhan and Malcolm X. Yeah. As an African American man, they've always, even though I'm a Christian and I love Jesus, I've always had a soft spot for those voices in my heart, just because it was, man, he's a strong Black brother. Yeah, like, Charlie. You know what I mean? And it's like, you can't say that to white people though, because they automatically think that you're gonna go off the deep end. But it's like, those voices resonated because you don't get to see those types of strong Black pictures on a regular basis. They were outlined.
Yes, Charlie, you're saying it because even though the Christ in me, the Holy Spirit will give me a little check when they say something that goes off, but I want their message to be right on, even though I know it's not, as I've gotten older and stuff, but it does resonate because you hear an articulate, smart Black man who's talking about, hey, you are somebody, you are something. And we have so many commonalities that I can agree with, and then they go off into their, you know, the inflammatory or false, doctrine stuff, and it's like, and it's like frustrating, and so, but I would imagine that a white person looking at that from the beginning, all they would see is the bottom line of that message and say, why would you even identify with that anyway as a Christian? And that just continues to further the divide of understanding. And instead, what our Black or what our white brothers and sisters need to do is to stop and think, okay, what am I missing here? Why are they resonating with that? Because there's something that wants us to resonate with our ancestry, our history. I find it interesting, Charlie. You know how, the ancestry.com and all that stuff is so popular? It's never once, I don't want to do that. You know why? Because white people, man, they can probably trace their stuff back. Oh, I'm a lineage of King George, or this or that or whatever. How many generations can I go back? First of all, I think it's a waste of money for me. It's like,
and it's hard because we've heard. I'm sure you've heard it. My ancestors came here and they worked hard and they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. And when we do a true look at history, we know that that's not true. That our ancestors, your great-grands, my great-grands, wanted to do the things that those other people did, but were legally not allowed to.
Not allowed legally.
You know what I mean? So to purchase homes, to purchase land, to build, to go to school, to do these different things, that perpetuated wealth and growth and development. And we talk about... Yeah, exactly. So we talk about a lot of immigrant groups that came to the United States started out doing illegal work. So you think about the Italians coming over and being a part of the mafia. They were gangs and all these types of things. Because of the lack of melanin in their skin, their children and children's children were able to integrate into society and become white.
Right.
Our Blackness created a stigma for us that prevented us from being able to fully integrate into whiteness. Yeah. And so, we couldn't blend in, no matter what our kids did, no matter how much. So when we look back, it's like, man, our grandparents wanted to buy houses, they couldn't. My dad bought his house that I grew up in. You know what I mean? And that's where I lived. And that was his lifelong dream, to be able to own his own home. And I'm like, man, that shouldn't be the case, but it was. And so for many of us, you know, our history starts with us. You just got your master's degree. I'm finishing up my master's degree. We're creating history as the first in our family a lot of times.
Yeah.
And when we've got others, our peers, that, man, my parents, my grandparents, oh yeah, we all got education. We all, like, it's just an assumption. And I'm like, wow, we still got a long way to go.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when you say that, Charlie, I just want to be clear on that. It was legally, it was against the law.
It was against the law
To, like, literally buy a house, own property. We watched a movie. What was that movie that we watched?
The Banker?
Yeah, by Samuel L. Jackson. You know.
Yeah.
Was it Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in it. But
Yep.
we watched that with our kids.
Yeah. It just it came out on Apple TV, and that movie talked about how, you know, Black people were not allowed to make these purchases even if they had the means. And I love how that brought that to light, you know, and how these two Black guys had to have a white person as their front man in order to go into the bank and actually sign the paperwork, you know.
Right.
They're doing all
I did that to my wife. I did that to my wife to buy this house. What you mean?
Yeah, you know, baby. We might get a more favorable interest rate.
Yeah. You know, so to bring this back around, I want to point out something about I think part of the reason why white people react so weird to Black Lives Matter, because I think they've been hearing for so long, you know, we're not supposed to make it about race. You know, we're supposed to pretend like everybody's equal. You know, I'm not supposed to say, you know, I would, if I saw White Lives Matter, oh my goodness, I'd be in so much trouble. Or why is there BET, Black Entertainment Television? We couldn't have white entertainment television, you know. And so there's the fact that they haven't learned all of this history, they don't understand like what you're saying. You broke that down so well, Charlie, like why there's a need for Black people to point out the fact that their lives matter. It's ridiculous. White people,
right. Why is there Black History Month? Because you got the rest of history. Why is there BET? Because it's called TV.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's like, we've got to create a space that you don't have to create. Yeah.
And so, you know, the white people that are reacting to that, you know, they haven't educated themselves. And so, you know, if you stop and think about it, you know, it makes sense when you hear all that history and you put that all into the context of that. But people need to do better at learning and educating themselves.
It's the history of it, because, you know, and Angie, what as you're talking, you know, white people, it's like when Angie and I get into a fight, or maybe if you're married and you listen to this, you get into a fight with your spouse. One person, when the fight's over, just wants to be like, okay, it's overdone, let's not bring it up anymore. But another person may need to be like, no, I just still need to just talk this out. I know we're on good grounds, but let's talk out like the why that happened so that it doesn't happen again. And, you know, I know for Black people, that's the way I feel. I don't talk for all Black people, but I like to learn from history so that we can make sure that, let's not have this happen again, obviously. But now let's look at how some of these things in the past, these generations that have passed with your family being able to establish wealth and even education and the opportunity for education that our people haven't had. And see, let's talk about those things because they still affect us today. You know, when you talk about things like privilege, and I'm not, this conversation is not about white privilege as per se, but a lot of white people have a hard time understanding white privilege because they personalize that. They look at their own story. Well, I'm not privileged. I had to work hard for everything I have. Okay, but that may be the case for you. But historically, white people have had 15 to 25 generations to gain wealth and educational opportunity, and it was illegal for Black people to own property in the United States in the 50s and 60s, just like our parents. And so when it's time for us to go to college and your parents could, you know, maybe take a second mortgage out on that home that they owned, that, you know, they were legally allowed to own. My parents didn't have that. And so they missed that. And so it's important to talk about some of these things, the history, not because I think white people owe us anything right now. And not because I want white people to feel guilty. But from a Christian perspective, when I talk about privilege, with privilege comes responsibility to serve, to understand, to be empathetic, to lead. And so You know,
Right.
but that's why when we talk about even like Black Lives Matter, man, see me, hear me, my people matter. And I want young Black
Right.
boys and girls to grow up knowing, hey, just because you're different and you might be the only Black kid in your class and you look different, and the kids in third grade are looking at you going, why is your hair like that? Hey, you're still beautiful.
Right.
You still matter,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so that's why that sentiment, that slogan it resonates with so many Black people. So
That's right.
you know, but then we have to separate Black Lives Matter
Mm-hmm.
sentiment from the movement. We've seen
Right.
the movement come on, and it's gained some steam. And really, when you talk about what's happened with it, and this is what I've seen, having been there in Ferguson, I saw how, and I would say this to people, how I think their movement is starting to be hijacked right now because they were starting to get funded by some outside political organizations that were saying, hey, we like what you're doing. Let us give money so you can start another chapter here and there. And after Ferguson, man, now Black Lives Matter, that organization, has 40 chapters all over the world, really. And they're being funded.
Right.
And so when you stop and look at, okay, where did that come from? You know, the funding of that. And the reason why it blew up so big is because they were starting to take money from some outside political interests. And so, again, you know, we're not trying to be political, but you can't talk about race in America without talking about politics, really. And a lot of the funding
Right.
that comes is from the Democratic organizations, PACs, and you know, funds that want to that do, a lot of times the Democrats do like to help. You've done inner city work in inner city Baltimore.
Right.
You did that in St. Louis.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times the
Oh yeah.
Democrats are the ones that are more concerned, or it seems to be, about, hey,
Right.
how can we get this help going to these Black people at the
Right.
grassroots level?
Right. Right.
So then when
Right.
they're offering money for these organizations to get their message out, of course they're going to take it, right?
Right.
But you got to follow the strings to see where that money's come from.
Right. And that's why I say it's an organization. At this point, it's an organization. And so it moved from a slogan, it moved from this kind of organic thing to being an institution.
Right.
And once you become an institution, you have to have, I mean, we work at churches. What happens? We've got a mission statement, we got bylaws, and we've got rules of operation and engagement. And if you want to know about who we are, what do? You go to the About page, you see what our vision and our mission is, and all of that kind of stuff. And so as pastors, me and you both know, just because it says church on the sign means that there doesn't mean that there's not a lot of baggage behind that name of that sign. And so for us, it's the same. And as a Christian, I have to be critical about the words and the movements and the things that I adopt and I'm a part of. And so I think it's only right that we scrutinize any of these kind of major movements and things, just to be like, all right, well, as a Christian, I want to think critically and biblically about the things that I promote. And so where can I do that? Where do I need to agree, disagree? Where can I ally, not ally? You know what I mean? And how can I move things forward? And we've done that in other areas. We've definitely got to do that in the area of race and in particular Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
We got to just scrutinize who they are, what they're about, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that we're clear about what our agenda is and what their agenda is.
Yeah. And so I just want to clarify, because I want to start talking about Black Lives Matter, the movement. But as we just kind of talked about for the last 15 minutes, the sentiment, the statement, you know, what do you say then, Charlie? Because I think we're both saying, hey, listen, I identify with Black Lives Matter, the statement, the sentiment. I agree, Black Lives Matter. What do you say to that suburban white Christian or that white Christian that's wrestling with that, going, well, wait, all lives matter. Don't blue lives matter? That person, that natural visceral reaction is, you know, don't I matter? Like, what do you say to that person?
Yeah, I think it's and what I've said to people in the past is we're being overly simplistic when we do that. And so I don't mean that as a condescension, but we're being overly simplistic, especially the Christians, because that's just not what we see represented in the gospel. Now, here's where I'm gonna clarify: Black Lives Matter movement does not represent the Christian gospel.
Right.
All right. So I think there's a
we're going to get
conflation.
into that. I'd say we're going to get into
right.
that. Oh, yeah.
So, but yeah, so I think there's a conflation that happens, and so I'm going, listen, but that's being overly simplistic to the Christian. You're being overly simplistic because we would celebrate Jesus saying, "I go after the 99." We would celebrate when Jesus talks about the prodigal son who goes after the what? The one son. And what does the big brother say? Don't all brothers matter?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And so he's upset because the brother gets a party and he didn't get nothing and he was faithful. And so I'm going, no, we see as believers, we are supposed to go. And a matter of fact, in the Old Testament, you see God take a special interest in the widow, the orphan, the exile, you know? And so God takes his special interest in those particular groups, over and above just the regular dudes, you know? And so I would say as a Christian, you don't have to fear when somebody says that. You can lean into it and go, okay, so what is the issue that's causing that? And at the same time, you don't need to minimize yourself.
Right.
And I think that's where it's like, man, you're telling me I got to be lower so that you can be more than. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying as Americans, we want everybody to be equal.
Right.
As police, we want the police to be the absolute best. We want them to live up to their slogan, what? To protect and to serve everybody. And so it's one of those things where it's like, man, but because we've been in an unjust, unequal society for so long, equality feels like brokenness. Like the distortion, it feels so distorted for us to even have equality in our current system, in our current way of doing things. Yeah. And so it's like, let's go back to peacefulness.
Right.
Let's go back to the way it was. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, like Alex and I both have feared and been nervous around police officers if we're driving at night. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. That's not because we're just nervous dudes. That's because we know that there's a perception of being a big black man.
Yeah. And
so I'm going, no, can we reform police in such a way that they don't have to fear big black guys because of that's the cultural perception. And so in those regards, man, Blue Lives Matter. We pray for police officers. I have police officers at our church. We've had police officers under our care as pastors. So it's all about, like, we want everybody to be treated with love, care, dignity, you know. And so it's not a minimization, but there is a moment of which we need to highlight this particular one.
Right.
That's good.
I saw a post on Facebook a few days ago, and it says, you never see the All Lives Matter people respond to the Blue Lives Matter movement with their slogan. It's only a response to Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And, you know, that struck me because, you know, if hearing the phrase Black Lives Matter upsets you, you need to figure out why it upsets you. You need to wrestle with that. You need to, like, have that out, you know, and because people get it when we say Blue Lives Matter. People get it. Right. Like, you know what? There have been a lot. Police officers are afraid to pull people over because they might not make it home tonight.
Right, right.
And so let me say, you know, as a white person married to a black man, Black Lives Matter. I'm afraid my husband might not make it home tonight if he's been a little heavy-footed driving home down the interstate. You know, never, no. You know, and how come we can understand the concept when the color is blue put in front of it, you know?
Right.
We have to acknowledge that there's something down inside of us that's causing this divide and get it.
That's so good. And I like to appeal to Christian brothers and sisters that, just like you said, Charlie, it takes a maturity to be able to understand what's going on with some people that have felt disenfranchised, marginalized for generations. And you know, it's insensitive to not see that and to just be like, just get over it.
Yeah.
That's like, you know, that's insensitive, and that's not the Christ-like love that we should be having. That we look at the story of the prodigal son, like you said, that older brother is villainized because he's a big baby about it. Like, you know, we villainize him, right? And so, you know, what we're saying, and I explain it like this, with our 5 kids, you know, and especially during COVID, we saw this. One of them just had a hard time with it. And just, you know, being pulled out of school, having the disruption of his schedule,
Right.
not having his friends around, and just feeling a little bit anxious, and and so we dealt with that, and we had to lean in a little bit more to him. Had to spend more time with him, and take him out for ice cream, just him, do personal things, give him special privileges that the other kids didn't have for a while. And we needed our other kids to have the maturity to know mom and dad obviously still love us, but he's going through something and they're trying to help him. And that's what I say to my Christian brothers and sisters, white ones, like, we're not saying that you don't matter, but you need to give some space on this one and show that level of maturity and stuff. So so let's talk about the movement, because that is a big thing. And I'm seeing now people want to dismiss the sentiment now. People that might have been struggling with that, going, well, don't all lives matter? Don't blue lives matter? See, this whole thing is wrong. And they want to dismiss the sentiment because of, the missteps of the movement. And I've gone on record saying this, and I'm just going to say what I feel about it, Charlie, and you can say what you want. But I saw how I say the movement was hijacked, and I think it happened right after Ferguson with the Mike Brown deal. I think that for political reasons, they kind of sold out their mission for money, power, and fame, and then all of a sudden they start to put their charters up, and then they put when they started to form and become that organization, they put out their 13 guiding principles. And I know I have a problem with some of them. You can go to their website and look at their guiding principles. Here's a few of them that as a Christian man I have a problem with. They say this: we are self-reflective and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folk, especially Black trans women, who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. Which my take on it is this: I love all people. I don't care if you're Black, white, brown, whatever. To me, the Bible is my guiding principle, my guiding light, and I'm not trying to tear down another another institution like marriage to elevate my own. And I read the book of Patrice Kaluur's. That's what it sounded like. I had such sympathy and empathy for this woman who, she's bisexual. That's what she says. She's been in relationships with men and women. And she's seen how trans people have been marginalized and how it's been tough on them. And so now what they want to do is, I think there's probably, and I'm not trying to psychoanalyze them, but it just seems like there's a chip on their shoulder. They're hurt. And so now they're trying to dismantle the traditional family, the people that are straight, because they want to. You got, who do we got there? Anyone do an introduction there? We got
no, they almost came down like a galloping stallion. No, I'm not done yet.
Dad, I've given you an hour. You should be done.
I got Alex a recording light for Father's Day, so now there's a sign on our door that's lit up that says.
I might have to do it because I'm joking.
Okay, so but then you got I'm cool with trans people, whatever, doing their thing, but when you go into their next guiding principle, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. That's an affront to me, because as a man, my biggest mission, and I heard Martellus Wiley say this, my biggest mission is to be a husband and a father. For the Black community, I think that's the best thing we can do. We hear statistics like 3/4 of Black babies are born without dads. One of the best things I can do for my community is to model what it's like to be a strong father who's present, who is there, who's committed to their mother, my wife, and do it the way that God, prescribes. And so when they say they want to dismantle,
and Doc, that's why I came to Baltimore to plant this church. Like, I'm here to disciple dudes to love their wives and their babies. I'm trying to encourage dudes to marry so we know that this is a fundamental part of human flourishing. I'll say it like that, like just human flourishing. Yeah. You need a husband and a wife, or a man and a wife. And so, to dismantle that, intentionally say, I'm going to dismantle that.
Yeah.
Is for us, you're fundamentally trying to break down something that we're intentionally giving our lives to build.
Yeah. Our mission, and I felt the same. We do. I mean,
it's like cross purposes, it's
right.
It's cross purposes for a Black called Black Lives Matter. to those two agendas, that just doesn't even make sense to me.
Yeah, because when we look at one of the biggest problems facing the Black community is strong men not being around, men that are going to model and teach and train. I always say it takes a man to show a man how to be a man. And so I can't get down with them wanting to disrupt that just because of their ideology, their beliefs of being, gay or bisexual or trans people, affirming that. See, that's where, when we look at the end game of this, it's like, why can't we, can we mutually exist, if you will? A lot of Christians have a problem with that. Like, can't we? No, they either need to accept Jesus. I don't want to have nothing to do with them. I reject that philosophy too. I mean,
right.
Like, I want people to be saved, but if they don't accept the Jesus that I know, I'm still going to love them. And I'm not going to tear them down. I'm not going to insult them, but I'm not going to try to disrupt them. I'm going to try to present them with the gospel that I feel. But if they want to choose what they're going to do, I can still be cool with them.
Right.
It's in the front to me when they say they want to dismantle. And I know that as Black people, there's a lot of Black people, whether they're Christian or not, that are feeling, that way. That's why I can't get down with the movement Black Lives Matter.
Right. And so we don't co-sign the Black Lives Matter movement, the institution, the organization. Those things have they're clear about what their agenda is.
Yeah.
And so if you're clear about your agenda, I have the option to agree or disagree. And as far as, and this is our position, as far as we can ally, we will ally. As far as we can. But like what you've just clearly delineated in that statement is we can't ally as much as we probably would if those weren't guiding principles. They're saying these are fundamental things to who we are and what we're trying to accomplish in the world. And so I'm like, man, as Christians, I can't co-sign that. You know what I'm saying? In good conscience.
Right.
And so I ally as much as I can. Like you said, I want everybody to be treated the same under the law. I want everybody to have the same care in hospitals. I want everybody to be able to believe what they want to believe and be safe and protected and not be victimized and not be ostracized. I believe that. But as far as dismantling things that we think are beneficial to humans, I can't do that. You know what I mean? But we would say that about any organization. You know what I'm saying? That's why we don't go to the barber shop and, you know what I mean, celebrate when Farrakhan says something crazy. I can't co-sign that. You know what I'm saying? And so we say as much as I can say, I affirm that. And then where we can't, we deviate, And I think that's the complexity of being a Christian today.
Well, and the sad thing is, though, Charlie, what's happened because the church has abdicated leadership of reconciliation racially. So the world is now saying to us, you got to pick and choose, and there are people with agendas that are funding this, that agree with the dismantling of, the family, just like there were history that agreed and funded the dismantling of the Black community or this or that or whatever. And so now it's been politicized. And now we Christian people are fighting over, and because we don't see the big picture, and we're not seeing this with love and having a conversation like this to talk about the sentiment, yes, movement, no. So, but what can we do to still affirm Black people, Black lives that matter, but not be down with the movement? And that's what we believe, that Christians have to engage and take a leadership role in leading. So.
Yeah, that's what's coming to me as we're kind of wrapping this up is, it's been overly simplified. Either you're pro Black Lives Matter or you're not. That's not okay on either on the white side or the Black side.
Right.
And that what has to happen is there has to be empathy, and then there has to be education. Starting off with the story that you told about when you were with the Spanish-speaking youth group and how you just, is everybody Mexican?
I was ignorant.
You had to educate yourself, because it was offensive, right? And so because you're empathetic and you did not want to offend all of those kids, you educated yourself. And that's the thing. It's not so simple. And people, we have to engage and we have to educate ourselves and be informed and hash through. This is hard stuff. You can't just simplify it. You have to educate yourself. You have to come from a place of empathy and humility, and then reach out to your fellow man.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I mean, and listen, we've not had leadership. We need leadership from the church. Like,
Amen.
that's what made the civil rights movement of the 60s distinct from this movement.
Yeah.
This is a purely secular movement.
Yes.
Now, it's the evolution of it, but I think because the church in a lot of ways got comfortable and passive. And Alex, you've been having racial conversations since I've known you.
Yeah.
Because we've been in largely white spaces, you know, and so we tried to have those conversations, and you know what happens? Soon as we bring it up, everybody runs to their corner. You know what I'm saying? Why you gotta talk about race?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And why are you always talking about? And it's like, cause it's always here.
Always.
And now we waited for the culture to be the vanguard of talking about these things, and now we're scrambling.
Yep.
You know, and so it's like, no, we've got to reclaim our prophetic voice in creating movements, creating conversations, creating action steps. I mean, in a lot of ways, the white evangelical church got co-opted by the conservative movement and the Republican Party, all of those things. And so it's like, yo, you can't be mad at the opposite side because they're doing the same thing. And so in this regard, we've got to reclaim that prophetic space and cut against the grain on both sides.
That's good, Charlie.
That's right.
Hey, there's a good book that talks about this stuff. What's that book called? Let's Start Again. Yeah, I really recommend it because the Lord really really, we just feel like the Lord's given us wisdom that he wants to share on this. And so to wrap this up, the answer to the questions, the question, which lives matter? Do Black lives matter or do all lives matter? I say yes. Exactly. And so hopefully after listening to this conversation, you understand that. So, hey, we're Alex and Angela Bryant here with my man, Charlie Mitchell. What's up? Last words?
Man, thank you for having me. And listen, learn as much as you can, engage with your brother, have some meals together, and I think you'll grow.
Yeah. Amen. I love it. Our hearts are so united on that stuff, Charlie. It was great talking with you today. So, all right, everybody, check us out at alexbryant.org and on Facebook, Alex Bryant Ministries, and listen for our podcast, The Way We See It, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. One thing too, so Charlie, where can they find you at if people want to connect with you?
I think I'm the Charlie Mitchell on Instagram, and you can find Epiphany Church, epiphanybmore.com. You can check out our church stuff there. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the places you can be.
All the places.
And just pray for us and keep us in your prayers as we move forward in Baltimore.
There it is. Hey, it's been another episode of The Way We See It. Alex, Angela Bryant, Charlie Mitchell. We're signing out. Word.
Peace.
Okay, so